Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Wednesday, April 3rd, 2019 meeting of the Lake Havasu City Planning and Zoning Commission. We apologize for the technical difficulties we've had this morning, but we're going to proceed. If you'd please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Jim Harris.
Here.
Lucas Steele.
Here.
Michael Gordon.
Here.
Doug Hardy. Susanna Ballard.
Here.
John Kendig.
Here.
Dan McGowan.
Here. Recuse yourself.
Chad Nelson.
Here.
Donald Bergen. Danny White.
Okay, we have one vacancy right now, so Mr. Bergen, would you come and please fill that seat right now? And we're going to have a recusal later, so Susanna will call you later. Minutes of the last meeting. Are there any additions, deletions, corrections, or anything on those minutes? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the last meeting's minutes.
I second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Still and a second by Mr. McGowan to approve. Any further discussion? Hearing none, let's go ahead and place our votes. And did Mr. Bergen get signed in? You're in? Good, thanks. Okay, motion passes. Moving along, correspondence and announcements. Mr. Schmeling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have none at this time.
Wow, okay. All right, moving to the public hearing. Let me first state that this is a public hearing and there is a structured order to this proceeding. The city staff will present each item. There will be time for the commission to ask questions of the staff, and then the applicant will have the opportunity to present their case to the commission. That being done, we will then open the proceeding to the public for their questions and input. I would ask that anyone of the public that wishes to speak limit their trips to the podium and microphone to one only. Keep all comments to less than 5 minutes and to stay on point and not discuss subject matter that is not pertinent to the decision being considered here today. After public testimony is taken, I will then close the public hearing and bring the motion back to the table for city staff's recommendation, discussion amongst the commission, and eventually a motion to approve or disapprove. The first item on today's agenda is item number ID 19-1931. It's the approval of a conditional use permit to allow the Dixie Belle tour boat to operate from the executive dock along with the Water Buzz flyboarding concession located at 1477 Queens Bay. Mr. Schmeling, your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sure most everyone in the room knows where the London Bridge Resort is. It is south of the bridge on the east side of the channel. This is the particular dock that we're talking about. These are the commercial docks, and these are obviously the extent of the rest of the docks. This request may sound a little bit familiar. In 2017, the commission approved almost an identical request for the Dixie Belle to operate across the channel, actually, over at the Island Fashion Mall. The request is, like I said, almost identical. The difference being that this request is also accompanied by a proposed dock addition of 20 feet, up to 20 feet. At this point, that hasn't been approved, so we modified that to read at least 10 feet in order to accommodate the uses on that dock. That concludes my portion of the presentation. If you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Okay, any questions of staff by commissioners? Anybody at all?
I have a question.
Mr. Nelson.
If we say at least 10 feet, what limits the length of the dock?
I believe the application through the Army Corps, they're gonna determine whether 20 is more appropriate or 10 is approvable. At this point, we don't know that, so we just said that at least 10 feet would be able to accommodate the additional use on that dock.
But how would we, if we were to approve this and 20 feet were to be the maximum, I guess that would be a Kelly question. If we need to state that, if we approve it.
Is that in the form of a question?
Yeah, is that a question?
No, I just want to make sure that if we say 10 feet, that it can't be 50 feet, you know? At least 10 feet could be determined as any feet after 10 feet.
So you're asking for a maximum?
Yes.
Maybe once we hear from the applicant and they can give us a little better feel for whether or not that's gonna get approved, we can modify the condition to read something not to exceed 20 feet or something
Okay.
on that order.
Okay, any other questions of staff by commissioners?
Yes, I have a question.
Mr. McGowan?
Stu, on this water buzz flyboarding, is this going to be a new applicant? Because there's one on the south end of the channel?
No, this is a conditional use permit that we approved several years ago for that location. We simply added that to note to the commission that there are other users on that dock as well.
Yeah, but is there any concern about somebody out there not knowing what they're doing, landing in a dock, on a dock?
There was at the time with regard to the flyboard and the operational characteristics of the flyboard, but today we're talking about the Dixie Belle, different characteristics, different operational characteristics. And that's something that you may want to ask the applicant with regard to how these uses are going to coincide with one another.
Thank you.
Any other questions of staff by the commissioners? Hearing none, is the applicant present? Would you like to come forward and make a little presentation? Sure. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Christina Gallo, and I'm the Assistant General Manager at the London Bridge Resort. What we are working on is just to let the Dixie Belle come use the dock space. So he would still own and operate it, but ours would just be a dock rental for them. So then we can provide, our tourists and our locals here that experience to get back on the lake again.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions of the applicant? Mr. Nelson?
I have a question. Do you feel that 10 feet is adequate for the Dixie Belle?
Well, our lawyers are working with the Army Corps, and we feel it would only need a max of 20. But we're still working through that with our lawyers.
Okay.
So my question to you would be, would you want to include that in the conditions, a max of 20?
I would say that's fair, yes.
Okay. Mr. McGowan?
Thank you. Back to the waterboarding. Where that takes place, how close is it to the boat or a dock or any kind of structure or people?
Well, I actually have Scott here from the water buzz boarding, and he can answer those questions for you. Is it okay if he comes up?
Please come to the microphone and state your name for the record.
My name is Scott Mitchell with Waterbuzz Flyboarding.
Okay, Mr. McGowan, your question?
Yeah, so my question, looking at this plan, how close the area where you're gonna do the whatever you call that, I forgot, flyboarding, to any structure or dock?
Currently, we operate on what would be the north side of that, of the dock. And actually, one of the reasons why I came here was this is encouraging for us because going out, whether it's 10 feet or 20 feet, one of the things we committed to the planning and zoning, the council, and the police department is we would stay in that quadrant over there. So this actually helps us with the dock extending. It keeps boats from coming into that area, which we haven't had, I believe it's 5 years now, Stuart? We haven't had a single incident yet. Our operations, we're already there working with the Bud Light boat that is currently there. And we stay clear of all boats. And just to let you know the way it works, our operator on the ski is a master certified operator, and they're the only ones who can control height, speed, distance, where they go. We control where those people fly at all times. So we keep them away from all boats, including the Dixie Belle. We would keep them away from that and set it up to where it actually works in our favor and in their favor.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions of the applicant? All right, thank you very much. This is a public hearing, so I will now open up the microphone to anybody that wishes to speak either in favor or in opposition of this item. Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to speak? Please come forward to the microphone and state your name for the record.
My name is Larry Eckman. I was here 2 years ago when the Dixie Belle was given a permit to work kitty corner across the channel there. One of the issues that came up was parking. And in a speech given by Charles Wood from the Indian tribe across the lake, he said his biggest challenge of putting in the ferry was getting enough parking to meet the requirements of the city. And when we discussed this before moving in front of Chagruz there, they says, oh, there's that public parking lot behind Javelina. Well, there's no real public parking lots here to take up the existing, other than the parking lot that was taken away by the Holiday Inn. So there's a real issue there. The Dixie Belle's going to stick out much farther than the 20-foot extension on the dock. It's a huge boat, okay? We brought a 57-footer in front of Chagruz, and it stuck out almost halfway across the first arch. I really question the safety of it, but everybody here appears to be in love with the Dixie Belle, so it's probably going to pass. But in passing it, I think you should remove the use permit to be able to park it in front of Chagruz. We don't need two boats that size in this channel. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Are there any questions of the speaker? No, thank you. We are still in the public hearing portion. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak on this item? Anybody at all? Hearing none, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing portion and bring it back to the table for staff's recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just one item of clarification. It was mentioned in your staff report. It was not in the application itself, but I made an assumption that this was essentially a one for the other, not we're going to operate at both locations. Making that assumption in your staff report is one thing, but I confirmed that with the applicant prior to the meeting, that in fact they will relinquish, if you will, that conditional use permit on the other dock in favor of this one. If this
Do we
one,
need to
if this
include
one
that
passes.
in the recommendations?
Yes, we can do that.
Okay.
All right, now, staff finds the proposed conditional use permit meets the requirements of the Development Code, Section 140504G. Based on those findings, the Development Review Committee recommends that Land Use Action 19-1931 be approved with the following conditions. Number 1, the existing docks shall be enlarged, modified by at least an additional 10 feet to accommodate the proposed business. All necessary permits shall be obtained prior to construction. Number 2, fueling of vessel shall be in conformance with Lake Havasu City Fire Code and all applicable laws and regulations. Number 3, fire extinguishers must be located on the dock. Number 4, vessel repair outside of routine maintenance shall be prohibited at the dock. Number 5, all loading and unloading of passengers shall be done from this location. Passenger pickup from another location or other locations shall be prohibited. Number 6, no additional signage allowed on or near the dock. Directional signage can be allowed on the property not to exceed 2 signs at 6 square feet per sign. 7, the dinner cruise shall be anchored outside the channel in order to minimize potential impacts on traffic within the channel. Number 8, the London Bridge Resort shall be responsible for the dedication of parking spaces on site to address the added demand as a result of this use. Number 9, the Dixie Belle Tour Boat must obtain a city business license and a TPT license from Lake Havasu City Administrative Services Department. Number 10, business transactions will occur in the office, which is located within London Bridge Resort. And number 11, hours of operation shall be limited to 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. daily.
Okay, we are at the table for questions of staff, and I would like to begin with, but before I do that, let me ask the applicant, are you on board with these recommendations? We're getting a nod from the applicant for the record. So I would take that as a yes.
Couldn't see.
Okay, we're at the table for questions of staff, and I'd like to begin by asking, has the resort addressed the additional parking, and are they on board with this? Mr. Schmaley?
Not to my knowledge, they have not approached me and told me how they're going to dedicate those parking spaces. I just anticipate because they do have a lot of parking on and around the site that they'll
There should be enough.
dedicate some area, yeah.
Okay. All right, that's all I have. Any questions by the commissioners of staff? Mr. Still?
Just following up on your question, Mr. Chairman, what is a parking requirement for the Dixie Belle? Like, how much parking does that require for dedication?
At this point, I haven't even calculated it, what additional spaces. What I'll probably do is go back to the parking requirements that were made at the time of the Island Fashion Mall and just carry that same number over. I mean, it's the same use, same anticipated.
I was reading through that ordinance and it begged the same exact question. I'm not sure we ever defined it in terms of X parking spaces per what?
Okay. Well, like I said, once in the event that this gets approved, I will work that out with the applicant.
Fair enough.
Okay, any other questions of staff by commissioners? Okay, we are at the table for further discussion and or a motion. Mr. Still?
I would like to make a motion, but I'd like to include a couple things, like a max not to exceed, if you guys are good with 20, if the applicant's good with 20 feet. Do I need to read through this entire?
You can say with staff recommendations.
You can
with
say
the
with
exception of-
yeah, and then amending number 1 to say at least an additional feet, but not more than 20 feet.
Okay.
Luke, are you going to
Mr. Nelson?
address removing the conditional use permit for the Chagru side?
The previously approved?
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Mr. Still again.
So with that, I will make a motion to approve this conditional use permit -19-1931, allowing the operation of the Dixie Belle from the upgraded dock in front of 1477 Queens Bay with staff recommendations, and amending recommendation number 1 to say additional 10 feet to accommodate, where it says that, we want to amend it to say an additional up to 20 feet to accommodate proposed business. And we also want to add the condition that the previously approved conditional use permit across the channel would be relinquished or revoked.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Still. Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion by Mr. Still and a second by Mr. McGowan to approve ID 19-1931 with staff recommendations and 2 modifications. Do I need to read the modifications into the record? All right. Discussion on the motion. Any discussion by the commissioners? If not, let's go ahead and proceed to the vote. Who we missing? There you go. Okay, motion passes. Good luck. The next item on today's agenda is ID 191930. It's a request for a major amendment to PD 01001, the Coves at Sailing Hawks, Track 2364, Lot 27, Assessor's Parcel Number 115-29-027A, approving a new general development plan reducing the density from 68 lots to 22 lots. And I believe we have a couple of recusals here.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Michael Gordon and I will be recusing ourselves.
Mr. Still and Mr. Gordon are excused for this issue, and Ms. Ballard, if you would come and take one of their positions, I would appreciate that. And in the meantime, Mr. Schmaling, your presentation.
Let's wait a couple seconds while she gets signed in.
Okay.
All right.
She had signed in.
Did she switch in okay?
She signed in? Okay,
All right.
we're good.
All right, here we go. The property is located on, along London Bridge Road on, in the west end of town, here in the, circle. Most of you are familiar with this property over time. We've had, several amendments. It's located here just, almost at the, dead end of Palo Verde North and, London Bridge Road. The Sailing Hawks has several elements that have all been moving forward over the years. We have the terraces, the ridge, the coves. This is the area we're speaking of today, a little over 13 acres, Mesquite Bay, and I believe it's the lofts at this point. The general development plan was originally approved in 2005. It included 88 units. Two different styles of units was approved for that. It was modified in 2013 to 68 units, then again modified in 2014, a year later, down to 63 units. So we have currently adopted, if you will, a general development plan and a final plat for 63 units, and this is what I have shown here. You've got Sailing Hawks Drive here, you have London Bridge Road here, and this is the configuration. It's internal streets, private streets, comes into a cul-de-sac, and then another cul-de-sac bulb here. This is the proposed plat, and if you look, it's very similar in nature to the existing plat. Entrance is identical for the most part. The street layout changes a little bit. They pull it off the property line a little bit. This cul-de-sac extends. They removed or eliminated the additional cul-de-sac bulb along here. Lots obviously larger, down to 22 from the 63. Here's a side-by-side comparison so you can kind of see what they're proposing. If you had the opportunity to drive by, there's obviously some grading work going on right now on the property. They have a grading permit, and at this point they're grading to the existing plan, the approved plan. They're coming before you today to reduce the density down to 22 single-family lots. Obviously, you recommend today, make a recommendation. This goes on to council next month. In the event that this gets approved, obviously changes to the approved plans, grading plans, everything that's happening right now at the city will have to occur. That concludes my portion of the presentation. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer those.
Are there any questions of staff by commissioners? Okay, Hearing none, is the applicant present? Please come to the podium and state your name for the record.
Good morning, Commissioner, staff. My name is Michael Gordon with Desert Land Group. Stuart did a pretty good overview of the proposed project. I wanted to kind of add to that and expand on that a little bit today if I could. I have a little PowerPoint presentation we put together just to kind of highlight a few things. Like Stuart mentioned, this is, Stuart, go ahead, yeah. The Cove at Sailing Hawks is the 4th of 5 neighborhoods within Sailing Hawks proposed to be developed. You can see the location of it on the screen. Originally, go back please. The Terraces was built first at the top, the Ridge was built second, Mesquite Bay has been building out over the last few years. The Cove and the Loft are still to be developed. The Cove currently, as it exists today, has an approved final plat, approved construction drawings, permits issued by Lake Havasu City. It's approved for 63 units, and as Stuart mentioned, is currently under construction. The owner is currently grading and building towards the approved plan today. In going through those efforts as they got going with the grading and analyzing things, realized that there, like any project, there is some changes that were warranted and would like to be considered, and that's what's brought us here today. Stuart, go ahead to the next slide, is to talk about a potential amendment to take the 63 lots down in density and make a few changes in that regard. I want to give a little history here. First of all, this is the original 2005 plan development and final plat that was approved in 2005. A couple of years later, in 2007, the same developer working with the city established, go back please, established lot grades, particularly for the upper street, the higher elevation lots. When the Ridge was being developed, they were setting lot grades for the Ridge, and at the same time imposed some lot grade restrictions on themselves for portions of the Cove. Those lot grades are well documented with Lake Havasu City, and they vary on the upper stretch of lots from 484 to 492. So this sat for a while, and this plan included 44 single-story patio homes, which are the larger lots on the plan, and it also included 42-story townhomes, which are the smaller lots on the plan. Next slide. After a couple revisions, like Stuart mentioned, in 2014, City Council approved an amendment to this and to the final plat. This is the current plan that is approved today. It was reduced slightly, as mentioned, from the 84 down to 63. Still a combination of larger lots and smaller lots in a configuration very similar to the original plan. The lot elevations that were approved to go with this current plan, again, same thing for that upper, on the lower part of the screen, the uppermost lots that were approved range in elevation from 485 to 491, very consistent and in line with the original approved elevations for these lots. So that's the plan that's approved today and is currently under construction. Next slide. Going forward, as we've analyzed the site and looked at this project, the plan that's out there, a combination of the small lots, the elevation change, and the things that are going on, create a very dense neighborhood of 63 homes ultimately. Not the most ideal situation for a development in today's market. The desire for larger single-family home lots is there, and the site really warrants a simpler, less dense plan of development. So as they've graded the site and looked at things, as they've been working through that, decided they'd like to propose a change to reduce the density, stick with the general configuration of the plan, the street configuration, the lot configuration, 2 terraces to the grading, stick to that original plan, and try and just simplify the project a little bit. During this process, when permits were pulled, there was some concern by the adjacent neighbors and the Ridge Homeowners Association, just below the screen here on the bottom. Concerns were discussed about heights of lots, heights of homes, things that may have been promised or not promised, or approved or not approved. So there's a lot of confusion, I think, out there in the public, within the neighborhood on what was approved originally, and what is or isn't allowed to be built. Hearing those concerns, the owner elected to, like I said, propose this change, and in doing so, we held a public meeting with the neighbor, with the surrounding property owners, and all of the neighbors within the Ridge townhomes to the bottom of the screen. In that meeting, the proposed plan was presented, as well as their concerns discussed. Their concerns ultimately over the height of some of these pads and the height of rooftops that would get built in front of them eventually. There was some underlying, you'll probably hear from some of the homeowners today, an underlying tone of or sentiment that they were guaranteed that rooftops would not exceed the finished floor of their townhomes within the Ridge. That's the feeling that the neighborhood has. While there are no approvals to that effect anywhere in the record, trying to be good neighbors and good stewards, as we proposed a change to this plan, ownership elected to try and come to those concerns and try and make some changes to try and meet some of those concerns as best as possible without having negative effects on this property itself. So in the proposed plan, you see it's been reduced from 63 lots down to 22. The combination of small lots and big lots go away, so the potential for townhomes or two-story combined homes goes away. You're down to 22 single-family home sites, reducing the density by 35%. In working with the neighbors and trying to listen to the concerns and do what we can to ensure that they have some view maintained, as well as preserving, we have the same effect going on here within this property. We have a lower elevation terrace, we have an upper terrace, and then the Ridge sits higher than that. So obviously trying to find a middle ground, not that we technically have to, but we felt it was the right thing to try and do. To find a middle ground, we lowered all of the upper terrace lots between 1 and 2.5 feet. And that allows us to maintain similar separation to the lots below, so that the homeowners within this proposed community can see over the homes below them, and allowing the Ridge homeowners the best opportunity to see over the back row homes within this community. Along with that, we did adjust from the first proposal. We showed the neighbors lots 2 through 6. The lot lines were turned more straight west. We turned those to the southwest at the angle you see them today. That aligns the angle of the lot lines in the homes in the same angle as the Ridge townhomes. So it opens up potentially some view corridors between homes and rooftops, since they're looking down the same angle instead of rooftops at an angle that's contradictory to their view angle. So those are some of the changes that we presented this about a month ago at a public meeting, had some good feedback, listened to the concerns. Since then, we've had some follow-up with some of the neighbors, have made some additional adjustments trying to find a middle ground, and that's where we sit today, is a plan that you see on the screen. Stuart, if you go to the next slide for me. Here is just an overlay for reference, a little hard to see, but you'll get the point. In the background, you see the current plan, the denser lot configuration. You see the lot elevations. You see over the top of it the proposed plan. Again, 2 terraces, and just in general speaking, you see how we've tried to adapt the plan a little bit to open up some views and protect what we can. On the left-hand side, lowered a couple of lots, an average of 2.5 feet. Throughout the middle, lowered all of those lots across the back, an average of 1.2 feet. And out on the little knob that sticks out to the north, lowered those lots an average of 1 foot. So I think that, Stuart, if you just go, yeah, right here. So as we sit here today, we're asking for a plan development change to adjust the plan from the 63 lots that are proposed to a 22 lot single family home configuration that looks like what you see on the screen. A lot less dense, doing what we can to fit grades in to be courteous to everyone involved here, and are looking for your support to move that forward. As Stuart mentioned, the project is under construction and has all the approvals. The grading plans and the infrastructure modifications that would be required to go to this plan are prepared. Pending approvals, they will be submitted to the city for approval, and then if this project does proceed in this fashion, permits would be reissued accordingly and construction would continue. So that's an overview of the past and where we're at and what we're trying to accomplish. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gordon. Are there any questions by the commissioners of Mr. Gordon, of the applicant? Any questions at all? I have one.
Yes.
In the original submittal, the original approval, there were some height restrictions, am I correct, for the, for this parcel?
Stuart can answer that, but to my understanding, no, there were not.
Okay.
In the original approval, there were some height restrictions. You don't have an overall map in yours, do you? There were height restrictions placed on about a half a dozen lots, but they were way up at the terraces at the very top. And they were relative to the existing homes on, is it Cabana or something back there?
Go to my
Whatever
first
streets
slide,
back there.
Stuart, you can see the.
I recall that now.
Yeah, though that's the only height restriction. And just to follow up on that a little bit, oh, these are going to move pretty slow. Here it is. Yeah, there were several lots here adjacent to these existing owners on Cabana that through a series of discussions at the time, the owner went ahead and modified the height and actually changed the height on some of these lots. However, I might add, just to expand on that a little bit, the balance, this area here is R1. The balance of this property is all R4, and the original owner did that for a couple of reasons. One, to allow for the density, because R4 is high-density multifamily, and number two, to allow for the potential of a 30-foot building height.
Correct.
And so, although her intent at that time, and it was stated many times throughout many public hearings, that the intent was to stair-step this whole project down all the way down to London Bridge Road, ultimately, there was never a condition of approval that limited the houses to any specific height, 15 feet or otherwise.
I was on the commission at that time, and I do recall that the terraces were restricted, and I just wanted to clarify that there were no other restrictions on these properties.
Stuart, if I can add to that from our perspective, if you look at the 2005 approval, there are no stipulations. What was there was an intent in there to have a portion, about half of the lots as a single-story home configuration, the larger lots, and half of them as a two-story.
Right.
There's no height assigned to what single-story definition is. Additionally, I will add, I mean, our goal here is obviously to build a quality community, something that is better than the approved plan, that we feel fits very well within the Sailing Hawks overall community. In the discussions with the neighbors, two things I'd like to point out. We have, by trying to modify these grades to be courteous to everyone, we are willing to have these grades be conditions of approval and have these grades that we've established lower than the approved elevations become the new elevations. So that is one thing we are willing to do. Additionally, in the discussions with the neighbors, we did state that these upper terraced lots, that the lots would have a 15-foot building height. So while that's not currently approved, it is something that, our goal here is to find lot elevations that still work for us, that are courteous to the neighbors, and then we will place some restrictions on ourselves, but those can only go so far, and we're trying to do what we can to find that happy medium here.
Okay, I was just trying to make that clarification.
Thank you.
Any other questions of the applicant by commissioners? Okay, thank you, Mr. Gordon.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, this is a public hearing, so I will now open up the microphone to the public. Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to speak on this item? Please come forward and state your name for the record.
Hi, my name is Ryan Atkins. I bought with some partners the project, the Ridge at Sailing Hawks, in 2004, long before most of you were up here on the commission. And over the years, we've been through a number of different neighbors, different property owners in the adjoining project, or in the adjoining properties within the project, and different plans for it. Back when I bought it from Diane, the original developer, the intent of the project was always that finished floor heights, top of roof would be at or below finished floor heights throughout the entire project. When we put on self-imposed height restrictions throughout the project, ourselves included, so as to minimally impact the terraces above us and the cove initially to minimize the impact on the ridge. Back in the 2005, I believe it was, planning and zoning hearing for the cove, I do believe it was in the staff recommendations that roof heights would be at or below the finished floor heights of the Ridge Sailing Hawks. A few years later, we gave them an additional couple feet to raise ours up a couple feet, so we worked together in that aspect. I'd like to say that the neighbors, the developers below us have been great so far. They've been pretty accommodating and changed their plans. We're fully in support of the lower density. They've lowered a lot of grades that help a lot for our view impacts, and the company doing the dirt work has done a great job as well, minimizing the dust. So they've been great neighbors. I don't fault the developers at all for what they're doing. They're playing with the rules they're given. That said, the city, I believe, missed the boat back in '05 when they did not implement the staff recommendations for the Ridge Sailing, or I'm sorry, for the cove, restricting those building heights. And I feel that now is probably a time where they could right a wrong that was done, and possibly avoid some potential liability down the road. The minimal, or the lots that really impact our homeowners based off the current plan, I believe is lot 3, I want to say, and 10, 11, 12, something like that. And we're talking about just a couple of foot of drop, which I, from my experience, don't believe would impact the sales prices of those lots. And I believe it would have little or no effect on the cost of grading or construction of those lots. So I don't think it's a huge impact to the current developer. They may have some drainage changes, things like that. And I had even mentioned that I would potentially be interested in helping them out with mitigating some of those costs if there were additional costs. So, long story short, like I said, I believe that the city, back before you guys were all up here, made a mistake when they did approve that project. And I think now is a chance where they could correct their actions. So that's really the gist of what I have to say, and I'd be glad to take any questions if anybody has any.
Any questions of the speaker? Mr. Nelson.
Ryan, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Do you or any of the neighbors have any documentation on that staff recommendation?
Yes, I do. I don't have it with me. One of the homeowners, I'm sure, probably does, but I don't have them with me. But yes, we do, and I mean, a number of people in this room, Stuart, I believe, as well, can, I believe, confirm that.
Mr. Schmaley, it was a staff recommendation that did not get adopted in the final approval. Is that what it was?
I have not gone to the extent of checking whether or not it actually made it into the record as a recommended condition of approval. The document that they're referring to is a staff report that I drafted in 2005, that it was part of our analysis, our overall analysis. There was a dozen or so bullet points on it, one of which described and talked about the heights relative to the ridge. I don't think it made it into the conditions. I can check that to see, but in any event, it didn't get adopted as a condition.
As having been a member of the commission at that time, height was a very contentious issue during those hearings, and I do not recall that ever getting into the final approvals. I don't recall ever a discussion about that personally. Not saying there wasn't, but
Yeah, there was a lot of discussion at the time because the applicant at that time was proposing two styles, if you will, of buildings, townhomes and regular single-family homes. And the discussion centered around single-story and two-story within that portion of the development. And now, to most individuals in Lake Havasu City that do development, one story means 15 feet because R1, which is 70% of the lots in town, have a maximum height limit of 15 feet. However, that was never entered into the approval as a condition. So when they talked about single story, and I'll just give this as an example, the ridge, their building heights range from 18 and a half to 19 and a half feet. And those are single story. That that's just how they ended up being approved. But once again, the maximum height in the district, in the underlying district, is 30 feet.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of the speaker by commissioners?
If I could follow up on Mr. Nelson's question.
Atkins.
One of the homeowners brought it up to me. The staff recommendations basically read, this is just an excerpt from it, but the subject property, lot 27, is 13.37 acres. The parcel slopes down towards London Bridge Road from east to west. There's approximately 35 feet of elevation change on the subject site from 495 to the low elevation of 460. The property has approximately 1,250 feet of frontage along London Bridge Road. The site will be graded such that the proposed building's roof line will be below the floor elevations in the ridge phase 2 to the east. That was just the excerpt from that
Mr.
staff
Chairman,
recommendation.
I would like to clarify that portion that he's reciting to you is not in the staff recommendation portion. So envision your staff
It's a
report,
description.
and you get in the background. What he's reading to you is an excerpt from the background and not the staff recommendation section.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions by the commission of the speaker? Do you have anything further, Mr. Atkins?
No, again, like I said, the developers have been great so far to work with. They've been very accommodating. There's just one or two little things we'd like to see at this point. I believe our homeowners would be happy, and again, I believe it's a chance for the commission and the staff to correct some previous actions and, again, potentially avoid some liability. So,
Okay, thank you very much.
all right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I also think it would be important to note in those staff recommendations, there's only two, and neither one of them address anything related to height or elevation or anything as to what's being alleged at
Do
the
you
podium.
have those there right now?
Well, I have the staff report and what it says in the staff recommendations, yes.
Would you mind reading into the record what those staff recommendations were?
The staff recommendation states, based on the findings listed above, the Development Review Committee recommends that Land Use Action 0500200000 be approved with the following conditions. 1, design review will be required to assure that all applicable building codes, ADA requirements, and Chapter 14.84 of the Lake Havasu City Code have been met. 2, a master grading plan shall be reviewed and approved for Phase 3 prior to the issuance of any building permits.
Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate that. We are still at the public hearing portion of the meeting. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak on this item? Hang on a second, Michael. Please come forward, state your name for the record.
Morning, everybody. My name is Don Bethke, and I live in the Ridge at Sailing Hawks. My wife Linda and I reside at 1651 Sailing Hawks. Many of the homes in Sailing Hawks and our vacation homes, and most of my neighbors are not able to attend this public hearing scheduled during the week with a mere 2 weeks' notice. I believe I represent the opinions of the residents of Sailing Hawks. We purchased a home with a view, as we were reassured by the agent for the developer, Ryan Atkins, that our views would be protected and any future construction in Cove in front of us could not be higher than our slab. It was our understanding that a meeting was held between the city and the original owner of Sailing Hawks, Diane Wolfang, in March 2005, where it was agreed with no opposition to restrict building above our slab. This was also confirmed by Wayne Lambert, who was the main contractor for Atkins, who mentioned they had to even revise the slab height to make this work. We are all very concerned when we saw dump trucks dumping dirt on the Cove approximately 2 months ago. We immediately called the city, who confirmed that a grading permit had not been pulled, and even more shocked to find out that over a year ago, the city had granted a grading permit to build without the slab height restriction. This was granted without notifying the adjacent homeowners. The residents of Sailing Hawks vehemently oppose the original grading permit as it violates everything we have been told. Although an amendment to grading plan is now proposed to reduce the number of lots, which we are in favor of, as well as various heights, have been revised lower. There are still numerous lots, specifically lots 2, 3, 8, 14, which are considerably higher than our slab. I respectfully request that DLG revisit the grading to lower the heights to be no higher than our slab throughout their cove development. We would also like to see if an alternative design is possible at the north end, as the current design magnifies the obstruction of the view since the homes are further away. Thank you for your reconsideration. If you have questions, I answered to the best of my ability, and I'd also like to add, last night I went out with a 15-foot pole, and we took pictures in front of our home and then in front of a couple of our neighbors. So if you'd like to see those, we can provide them.
Questions of the speaker, Mr.
I
Nelson.
have a question. There's two different things that have been said by Mr. Atkins and by you, and one was the patio height, the patio deck height is what Mr. Atkins said, and you're saying the slab height.
Well, basically, our patio and our slab are all one consistent height.
Okay.
So ours are, the units facing the lakes are over under designs, garage underneath, the home above. So the slab for the home
is the patio
all the way, correct?
Okay. That was my only question.
Any other questions of the speaker by commissioners? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We are still in the public hearing portion. Please come forward, state your name for the record.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Bernie Lash. My address is 1651 Sailing Hawks Drive, Unit 110. And I'm here just to talk about lot number 3. That's the lot just to the south there. Lot 3 is really a transition lot. Michael and Matt have done a good job. They've met with us a couple of times right on my neighbor Chris is in the back. Chris is lot 109. Just a clarification, these are not townhomes, they're actually single-family detached homes. They look like they're attached, but they are single-family. So our pad elevation is 497.5. So lot 3 becomes a transition between lot 2 and lot 4. Okay, now they've already lowered lot 2 to 82.5, which is 15 feet below our pad site. However, because of the transition to lot 4, they've raised lot 3 3.2 feet. You go through lot 2, and then they raise it 1.5 to lot 4. Is that clear how that works elevation-wise? So talking to Matt this morning, I looked at it last night, and again, they were kind enough. They've been out a couple of times, visited with us. I'm not asking them to, I won't get 15 feet. I'm not concerned about that. I'm not trying to be hard on anybody. All I'd like to do is have them flip the 1.5 to the south and then do the 3.2 to the north. In other words, from lot 2 to lot 3 would go up 1.5 feet. And then from lot 3 to lot 4.
Excuse me a second. Mr. Schmeling, would you put up the next slide that shows the...
Have you got this on slide?
No, this one here, where they were showing the
You're talking to a guy
average.
who doesn't have a computer, so I don't...
No, I was talking to Mr. Schmeling here. You can go
Oh,
ahead.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, and he's changed the slide.
Yeah, do you see that, Stuart? So it's really, it's just flipping. In other words, instead of taking the 1.5 feet on the north side, we'll take the 1.5 feet on the south side, effectively lowering that lot. And Matt was going to take, we talked this morning, he's going to take a look at it. It shouldn't have any variable on their lot number 4. I mean, it stays the same, it just affects lot number 2. And I'd be a happy camper. Also, I'd like to, obviously we support the plan, and very seldom do you get people to come and visit and actually stand there and look at things with you. It's a little hard to see. I don't know if they mentioned, but we were out last night with a pole, but they haven't cut the lots down yet. There's still 2 feet to be removed from lots 2 and 3. So we were trying to catch them before they get the equipment moving so they don't have to come back again. And as I said, they've been reasonable. We hope that is an easy solution, at least for myself personally.
Okay, Thank you. Are there any questions of the speaker?
That was the only thing I was
Mr.
gonna,
Nelson?
that was the only thing I was gonna clarify, is if you guys were factoring in how much they were already taken down, so.
Right. Well, it's a little hard, you know, Mr. Nelson, it's a little difficult. This was like, it was almost getting dark, I think, when we were out there, but, you know, you're right, it's hard to do. And in this business, I've been in the business a lot, visual things are really tough. You can take photographs, you can impose things on certain things, but nothing is better than to put up something you know is that height, and you get a perspective from the front of the lot to the back of the lot. And we appreciate them turning the lot lines. That helps, because if you look between lots 109 and 110, that's Chris and myself, the lot between 2 and 3 is lined up directly. There you go. Thanks, Stuart. It's lined up directly between the two. So in theory, it's not going to be 15 feet all the way across. There'll be a home with a pitched roof, flat roof, then you'll have an open space. So, you know, we'll have a little window. And we were happy with the 60, with lot 2 works fine. That's, I mean, Chris, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
anyway.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate it.
And again, we'd support you moving this forward.
Thank you. Anybody else that wishes to speak on this item? Anybody at all? Please come forward, state your name for the record.
My name is Joe Orlando. My wife Sherry and I have been residents of Lake Havasu since 1996. We enjoy the lake. We've enjoyed it, the perks that we've had here, and we would like to continue to enjoy those, including the views that we now have at the ridge. When we originally went to the meeting, we were pretty excited about the new proposal that they gave us, lowering the density of the project, which basically makes much more economic sense in this real estate environment than what would be if they had originally gone with the original drawings. When Diane Wildfang originally started the project, the intent was to maintain the view of the water for each one of the phases, the original phase, the phase number 2, which is the ridge, and then the cove, phase number 3. Those were in letters that were given to the city. So once we looked at that, we were pleased that they were going to reduce the density, but once we looked at it a little closer, we realized that the new proposal was going to be very detrimental to our views. I'd like to read one thing from one of our people that live in 120. I just spent 7 days in my place in Sailing Hawks 120, woke up each morning to the earth movers and graders moving dirt, cutting elevations and dozing. I talked to a couple of the operators about the grade elevations, and most of the lots were close to finished grade, plus or minus 1 foot. To check the grades, I flew my drone over the deck, floor plate, at 0 elevation, took it across the top 8 lots, got a digital readout of each lot, and they were minus 15 to 17 feet below our floor plates. This is in compliance with the grading plan, although very depressing. Lots 10, 11, and 12 are the front 3 lots on the cul-de-sac. At those grade levels are directly at the shoreline, so when you go vertical 13 to 15 foot, it blocks the entire lake plus some of the land on the other side. Again, very depressing. These lots in the front, we paid substantially higher valued dollars to enjoy the view, about $150,000 higher for the lots that face the front versus all of the combined lots in the unit. We were assured at that time by the developer and the real estate agent when we signed the plans or the contract that our views would be protected. We have each one of these townhomes were changed in the interior. We all upgraded our townhomes to where we felt were desirable for our needs. My neighbor next door in 119 actually opened his house to the Christmas special program that goes around and they view the lots. This is a very, very gorgeous home. There's a house that, there's a townhome there currently for sale on the market at $1.2 million. The man is absolutely devastated because the property value will be substantially decreased if this plan in its current form is approved. I'll be glad to answer any questions as best I can.
Any questions of the speaker by the commission? Mr. Nelson?
My only, it's a really tough situation, but, you know, the only thing I could say to you and to the residents is they do currently already have an approved plan that's higher.
I understand that.
They can build on it right now, and it's higher.
But as I understand it, the approved plan would continue to leave us the view of the lake that we had previous, that we currently have. Even though there's a difference in height, I think that it would have still left us with a view of our current.
Stu, can you pull up the current plan?
I can, but you have the current plan under here. It's probably easiest to see. These are the units that he's referring to, Unit 119. Here is the current configuration. You can see the lot configuration basically running perpendicular to that property line. And the elevations are even on there, if you can read them, 488.5, 488.5, 486, and so on. But yeah, the lot configuration, although a little bit different, obviously much more dense, which means many more roofs, and smaller setbacks in between, which would usually equate to some kind of view corridor.
The current plan that's presented now, the real concern are lots 10, 11, and 12, because that basically is the largest part of the lake view for our units. The height there with a 15-foot house
10, 11, 12.
going up in that particular area cuts out the entire view of the lake as well as some property on the other side. So it basically destroys the value of our property substantially.
Stuart, I think what Mr. Nelson was requesting was the original design.
No, this is the underlying plan here is what is approved now. And I guess it's a matter of opinion of whether.
This is the underlying plan that's approved, correct?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yes.
This is what's approved right now. So
Okay.
basically you're saying where lot 7, lot 8 are on this plan is
Right.
where lot 10 and
10, 11, and 12, yes.
right.
Those
Yes, because
The
that
grading-
cul-de-sac bulb pushes out further is what he's stating.
Okay. Well, I'm going to give Desert Land Group a chance to talk about this, but I don't know if the pad elevations of those lots are lower. That's something I'll ask Desert Land Group. But from what I see, what you guys have requested, I think they're being generous. I feel really bad because I'm a realtor myself, and so I feel bad of those things that you've been promised, but we don't have any documents showing.
Well, we have
that.
contracts that were given to us when we purchased the property. And the documents clearly state that our views would not be denigrated by any additional thing in the cove. You know, they have been good neighbors. We would like them to be great neighbors. What we would really appreciate is the northern part of the plan currently, lots 10, 11, and 12, to be reduced substantially, because 3 to 5 foot drop there probably won't affect the view of the property that they're trying to sell, but it would certainly increase the view that we have that they're currently taking away.
Yeah, I understand.
All right, thank you. Any other questions of the speaker? Thank you, Mr. Orlando.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else in the audience that wishes to speak on this item, either pro or con? Hearing none, I'm going to bring it back to the table for follow-up by Mr. Gordon, the applicant.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to address a couple of the comments and questions if I can, and then I'll answer any other questions. First of all, as was stated, the plan right now is approved, it's permitted, it's under construction at quite a bit higher grades than what we're proposing to do here. The owner is prepared just to continue building that plan as proposed with more density and the higher grades. It's not, not the best interest of anybody, I don't feel. We don't want that. I think we can make it better, but we need to be able to move forward swiftly on this if possible. In terms of grades, as was pointed out, to go back to 05, again, not in a condition, not a staff recommendation, it was in the staff report. A lot of stuff goes into staff reports that are merely for discussion that don't end up in approvals. That being said, I understand the intent that was shown in the 2005 staff report and some of the meetings, but what hasn't been talked about today, 2 years later in 2007, the same developer, Diane Wildfang, and the city agreed to specific elevations for lots. And it's very well documented. There were original elevations set. The ridge requested to raise elevations 1 foot, and in that letter and document, the grades of the cove lots came up 1 foot with those elevations. And what I want to point out is that doesn't show an intent at all of being 15 feet or more below slab elevation, because those elevations, specifically the ones out there on to the north that was just discussed, only show a differential of around 10 feet. So the intent of 05 and the conditions aren't there to support what's being mentioned. Furthermore, 2 years later, as the project developed, specific elevations were set for all of these upper lots. And it certainly wasn't, they were not set, at 15 feet or less below, or more below the current approved elevations or the built elevations in the ridge. So understand where their comments and concerns are coming from. Hope the commission understands that this owner, purchased this property with those approvals in place, those entitlements in place, and some of the things that are being mentioned are certainly not part of the restrictions or conditions there. Again, we're trying to do what we can to make this fit and make this a good fit for everybody. The other thing I want to mention in terms of grades and views, the view angles, if you will. You look at the bottom of the screen, you see the Ridge Townhomes, 109 through 120 from left to right. You see they're all orientated to the southwest. That wasn't done on happenstance. It was done, I'm sure, to try and orientate these homes to take advantage of the best view possible. And like we mentioned before, we took some of the proposed lots and rotated them on the same angle to try and maintain that view angle. And I wish the screen showed it, but below 120, so 150, 49, 48, 47 in G, that's not a house, okay? The next house down, I believe, is 121. It actually sits, you can see the angle of the lot line, it sits looking to the northwest, okay? So if you were to draw view angles, you're looking either southwest or northwest as the prime view. There's a reason, and straight ahead, the ridge that goes out to the north is higher, was always higher, and the original topo and the original grading is higher. And if you were to look at an aerial photograph, you would see some of the shoreline projects out into the lake along that ridge line. So I bring all that up because when you study the plan and look at what the intent was originally, it's clear most of the homes were orientated to the southwest, then it turns the corner, the homes are orientated to the northwest. There is a ridge that goes out to the north, was always proposed to be higher, and there seems to me to be clear reasons why it was always higher. Stuart, if you would pan down a couple of pages for me. Proposed plan, keep going. Just to kind of summarize and show the consistency that's here with the original plan. Again, 2005, all 88 units in this. You can see that upper ridge where we're talking about elevations and the grades that were there, 484 to 486, 47 to 488 across the front of the Ridge townhomes. And again, that ridge to the north, always proposed to be higher, 490 to 492. Those are the grades that are in writing approved as specific lot elevations. Go to the next slide.
And that is a natural ridge that was...
It's a natural ridge that has been cut down now in the grading that's happened, cut down to where it's at today. We've proposed to take it down a foot more. They're asking for quite a bit more down than that. Current approved plan, here you can see, again, While the plan modified a little bit, the general flow and feel of the plan's the same. Lower street, upper ridge of lots in kind of a reverse C configuration. 485 to 488 on the left-hand side. Again, 487 to 488.5 across the front of the ridge townhomes. 489 to 491 to the north, a little bit lower than what was even approved in writing with the city originally, but very consistent to the original plan. And Stuart, go one more for me. And the other way, there we go. And in the proposed plan, again, same general configuration, lower terrace, upper terrace, reverse C configuration grading wise. Now we're at a 482.5 to 485.7 on the left. Again, 2.5 feet roughly lower than the approved elevations. 487 to 488 across the middle. Those are always stayed pretty consistent. Those are meeting the 15-foot supposed requirement or assumption that's there. And again, the portion to the north, same configuration, 49 to 490, slightly higher, but consistent and actually lower than the approved grades. So I just wanted to kind of point that out. I mean, we're trying to be accommodating, trying to massage this down in everybody's best interest, but knowing that there was a community proposed in front, knowing how communities develop, I think it's unfair to assume that one would have had a 180-degree view panoramic forever. So just wanted to add some clarification to that. The question came up about costs to make some of the requested changes. We've heard and seen some of the comments and the requests to take lots down further. It's not as simple as just lowering lots, okay? Right now the site balances. If we take lots down substantially as requested, another 2, 3, 4 feet in places, a couple of things happen. Now you end up with the export of material, costly to do, costly to get rid of. You also end up with, to achieve that, a very flat site, and now we've got changes to grading, or changes to drainage, changes to sewer, things that complicate the overall infrastructure design. Talking to the engineer and the owner rep, they feel that's somewhere in the neighborhood of a $75,000 to $100,000 change to try and bring things down to the current requested elevations. On top of that, there are no max elevation set to homes like we've talked about. So by doing what we're proposing, talking about 15-foot build height potentially being a restriction on what we do, that affects what can be built on these homes. Obviously large homes are going to want large garages in this town, are going to want RV garages. 15 feet doesn't accommodate an RV garage very well. Potentially being able to sink a portion of that garage to achieve an RV garage is possible on some of the lots. That adds costs to the home and complications to building homes as well. So there's a lot of implications if we keep trying to manipulate this, and at some point it doesn't make sense, and the owner has to continue building with what is approved. Again, I think I covered most of the questions and concerns there. One more thing I did want to point out, Stuart, if you would go up one slide for me. Actually, keep going up for me. I want to find the one that shows. Keep going. Keep going. One more. The discussion that was had about lot 109, 110 and the ridge, lots 2 and 3 in front. It's a unique situation. We've been trying to work with the neighbors to remedy that. Lot 109 and 110 sit 5 feet lower than lots 111 through 120. So hence you see the issue with making everything 15 feet below. Below what? Below 109 and 110? That would never work. So, but below 10, so we're never going to achieve that to begin with across all the front lots. What we've tried to do is try and get the lots 2 and 3 below 109 and 110 to have a 15-foot differential to lots 2 and 3 above. Because of that grade change, it's hard to make an abrupt 5-foot grade change on a property line. Can it be done? Yes, but then the street has to step up and a lot of other things have to happen to achieve that. Right now we've got lot 2 at 15 feet below 109 and 110, and lot 3 at, I think it's 12 feet below 109 and 110, and then everything else across is 15 feet. So, we've tried to massage it, tried to make the best of a situation that's very difficult because of the moving grades and the situation at hand. Anyway, I think that addresses the comments that were made. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gordon. Any further questions from Mr. Gordon? All right. We are now at the table. The public testimony portion is closed, and we are now at the table for staff's recommendations. Mr. Schmaling.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Staff finds the proposed rezoning meets all the requirements set forth in 140504L. Based on the findings, the review committee recommends that land use action 1930, amending PD 01001, tract 2364, lot 27, by amending the general development plan, reducing the density within phase 3 of Sailing Hawks, the Coves, from 63 lots to 22 lots, be forwarded to the City Council with the following conditions. Condition number 1, the subdivision plat must be amended to reflect the new lot configuration. Plan changes are required on all open permits for the property. Lot elevations for proposed lots 2 through 15 shall be no greater than the elevations on the existing lot 1 through 20 on the approved grading plan. Engineering staff must review and approve the proposed utility plans. Number 5, an 8-foot public utility easement must remain along both sides of street frontages. A 16-foot PUE and DE must remain along the northern property line. A 10-foot PUE shall be located along the entire London Bridge Road frontage, and the driveway of to lot 16 shall be designated as a PUE.
All right, does the applicant understand and agree with the recommendations? Okay, we have a nod indicating yes. Okay, we are now at the table for discussion and or a motion. Mr. Nelson, I see you champing at the bit.
Okay, so the applicant said that they were willing to agree. It would be, we didn't talk about specific elevations on lot elevations in your recommendations, but the applicant said that they're willing to agree to the lot elevations that they are proposing in today's meeting, basically guaranteeing that they will drop those lots. How do we, is there a map that we can use that has those elevations per lot?
Did the applicant actually agree to that?
Yeah, the proposed grading plan that was submitted, the applicant and owner are 100% comfortable with the elevations proposed on that plan being conditions of approval for these lots. And they are lower, they're all lower than what is approved currently.
Do we have that proposed grading plan today?
Yeah, I think you do in one of
Yes.
your slides.
Do I have it? Hold on. Yes, I do right there.
Yes.
How would we submit that as in the recommendations?
Just include that as a part of the recommendation.
Yeah.
That
Okay.
these presented grades will remain as is,
If there's
or
no,
as stated.
if
You'll-
there's no further discussion, or Michael, you have something?
Oh, there's
Well,
further
I would just
discussion.
submit for the record, what he has on the screen is Exhibit 2. It's the proposed grading exhibit that was submitted to the neighbors, and I believe is in the staff report. It's what's on in your packet and what's on the screen. This would be the exhibit that would set those grades, and owner is acceptable of that condition. So what's on the screen is the exhibit that's in your packet. And
So you're willing to lock into the grades displayed on the screen?
correct.
Okay.
And I would use that exhibit to modify condition number 2.
Okay. Any further questions or discussion on the motion? I do have a couple of comments. I think the applicant here has done a great job of trying to mitigate both density, orientation to allow view corridors, and height at cost, substantial cost to themselves. And with their willingness to stipulate to these grades, I think they've gone probably above and beyond what most developers would, being actually good neighbors. So I'm on board with this application. So we are at the table for discussion and or a motion. Anybody want to take a stab at it? Mr. Nelson?
I'll make a motion to approve 19-1930 with staff's recommendations and amendment to, in addition to the recommendations to include a 15-foot building height restriction and to include the proposed lot grading plan known as Exhibit 2 as part of the record to be the lot elevation heights.
Clarification on your motion, the 15-foot height limitation.
Building heights restriction.
Is that, Mr. Gordon, please come back to the.
Okay, we can't,
Not until we
we
have
have
a
to let
second.
it fail
All right.
or have it second and
Do we have a
discussion?
second, or do we let the motion fail? I think the motion is going to fail for lack of a second. You might need some additional clarification on your motion. And Mr. Gordon, would you like to come back and address the 15-foot height?
Mr. Chairman,
specification?
may I suggest it might also be helpful, maybe Stuart can suggest what he thinks should be a proper amendment to, do you mean 2 or 3? You mean recommendation 3, yeah.
I meant 3, sorry.
Okay.
I said 2, didn't I?
Can you, yeah, you said 2, I was confused.
Okay.
Maybe if you could give kind of a recommendation of how that amends, and then let the commission hear that, and then they can decide if they like that or not.
Instead of my recommendation tying it back to the original or approved grading plan, you could say something like the condition is that the applicant will abide by the modified grades as reflected in Exhibit 1, we'll call it.
And is that amending?
Number 3.
Number
That's
3.
In favor of number 3 at all. We'll just remove the current language in number 3.
Okay, we're at the table for discussion and or a motion.
So I'll withdraw my motion. And it's recommendation number 3.
Correct.
Okay.
It's on screen right now.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to approve ID 19-1930 with staff recommendations, modifying recommendation number 3, lot elevations for proposed lot elevations to be as proposed grading plan known as Exhibit 1, and building height restrictions to be 15 feet.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we are at the table for discussion. I'm going to ask about the 15-foot height limitation. That's an R4PD location, and did the applicant agree to the 15-foot height limitation? Please come to the microphone.
Thank you. As I stated in my presentation, in our meeting with the neighbors, we did discuss and agree to a 15-foot height exception. It's not in here at the moment. My issue here with staying with what we have said we would do is the fact that the neighbors continue to ask and request demands going forward on lowering stuff and adjusting stuff. So while our gut is, or as much as we want to be good neighbors, we want to do the right thing here. We did say we would stick to 15 feet. So
For the entire project? Or are we talking a specific row of lots, or? I didn't get that out of the discussion here today. And I apologize for my denseness, if you will, but I didn't hear that.
When we discussed this with the neighbors, the proposal was, or the discussion was, as they've expressed today, they thought or felt that they were promised or entitled to have rooftops not exceed their patio elevations. To achieve that, we were trying to get to a 15-foot elevation underneath their, on the lots in front of them, immediately in front of them, get to a 15-foot elevation. That's what drove where we ended up with today, below their floor elevations. That would, as I implied and said in that meeting, that we would then build to a 15-foot height limit from those approved elevations. I will go along with, an owner will go along with a restriction of a 15-foot build from the approved pad elevations on the upper lots, okay?
You need to specify those lots.
Can we go to the plan, please?
Yeah, because they thought that he agreed to the 15-foot, or said that he was fine with that. The pad elevations and the density proposed today.
I did not
Stu, can you
understand
go
that.
I apologize.
one where we can see the lot numbers better, 2 through. Yeah. Lots 2 through, 2 through 15. So everything on the upper elevation, the upper terrace.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 15, you will agree to a 15-foot.
Everything on the upper terrace, lots 2 through 15.
A 15-foot max build height
Yes.
from the given elevation.
Yes, we said that in the public meeting to the neighbors that we would do that. We will stick with that.
Then that needs to be
At this
clarified
point in time.
in the motion.
So ownership is okay for that to become a condition at this time.
That's not what the motion said.
That's what I heard. I apologize.
Okay, so we are still at discussion and/or voting on the motion.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Gordon, can you repeat just the part about the 15-foot? I'm going to type it, and then I'm going to walk it over to Stuart, and I'm going to walk it over to the commission so we get it right. But can you repeat?
Yes, ownership is okay with a condition that lots 2 through 15 have a maximum build height of 15
Let me
feet.
interrupt you. It cannot be 2 through 15. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 15.
No, through 15.
Oh, you're going to do all of them,
Correct.
not just that back row.
We are doing all of them, okay?
Okay.
Again, for the record,
That's
we are
why I'm
trying to work
asking.
in good faith here, and we feel like we've been doing that, and that was echoed by some of the neighbors in their compliments, and we appreciate that. There have been some additional requests and demands and some other things said outside of this meeting we're not okay with. So if this carries forward here and in council with the grades as presented and in a condition of a maximum build of 15 feet above approved pad elevations for lots 2 through 15, we're okay with that condition.
Okay. And we are going to wait for Ms. Gary to type that out. Yeah, Stuart, if you can, modify the slide. It's important that we have the clarifications based on what happened the last time.
Right. So we don't have to face this again down the road. I agree.
And I only thought it was the back row. I didn't know about the front.
I still don't think he's understanding what we're saying.
Who? We'll speak up. Speak up. Michael, If you could come back to the podium. Susanna, do you have a question?
Michael, I have one additional question, just
Yes.
to clarify what you have specifically said. This is to include lots 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15.
Yes, and I will expand on that to include Lot 1.
Now, that's different from what you proposed a few minutes ago when you said.
Correct.
lots 2.
For the record, comments from the neighbors that we're doing our best to accommodate. Lot 1 was discussed in the public meeting, and ownership is okay, including Lot 1 in that as well. So lots 1 through 15, yes, inclusively.
Thank you.
Personal commentary? You're being very generous.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay,
Mr. Nelson.
we're gonna make a motion here.
You're gonna amend a motion.
We're gonna amend my
And then
previous
we'll ask if the
motion,
seconder will second
and we'll
the
see if
amendment.
this will pass.
We didn't vote, but we still have to amend
Okay,
it. with
I'm
a second.
amending my previous motion, amending, or to approve ID 19-1930 with staff recommendations, amending condition 3 by deleting the current condition in its entirety and replacing it with the following. Lot elevation shall be no greater than as shown on the proposed grading plan submitted and labeled as Exhibit A. And lots 1 through 15 to have a maximum build height of no more than 15 feet above the approved pad elevations.
Okay, the seconder, do you amend your second and agree?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so we have a motion by Mr. Nelson and a second by Mr. McGowan to approve ID 19-1930 with the stated, with staff recommendations and the stated modified condition. Any further discussion on this issue by commissioners? Again, I'd like to say, you guys need to be grateful. He's being very generous. Myself as a builder, broker, developer, I'm not sure I'd be on board with that, but congratulations. Back to the floor. Let's go ahead and place our votes. Motion passes unanimously. Congratulations to both sides. All right,
Okay, can I interrupt for just 1 second?
Mr. Schmeling.
Just for full disclosure, because I know that I'm gonna have to state this again at the city council meeting, that the way in which we do grading permits and or building height determinations, any lot in town, this applies to any lot in town for single or two family homes, each lot is assigned a max grade, which if this gets approved by council, you essentially did. Now, those lots all reside, if you will, above the street a couple of feet, possibly 3 feet in some locations. From that elevation is where we establish the 15 feet. All throughout town, you see places where either existing homes and or new homes are being built with RV garages that traditionally are very difficult to attain through the typical 15-foot building height.
You can't get there.
You can't get there. As a builder, you would know that, the rest may not. So, what we allow is the voluntary, if you will, reduction of your lot in order to accommodate additional building height. But how that works is you have the grade established. You have a 15-foot ceiling here that you can't penetrate. If they choose to reduce one of those lots or any or all of those lots an additional foot, 2 feet, 3 feet, they can have a structure that measures 18 feet in height, for example. However, it won't penetrate that 15-foot above the grade.
If they choose to excavate 15 feet out of those lots, they can build 30-foot tall structures.
True,
Period.
that's the extreme example. However, what I want to avoid is that when this, assuming it gets approved, I don't want someone to come back later and say, we've got a house being built right now and it's 16 and a half foot tall. And it may be, but they will have had to have lowered the lot in order to accommodate that.
You're on the
Full
record.
disclosure.
All right. Motion has been approved. Congratulations to both sides. Moving forward, we are at the call to the public. If there's anybody that wishes to address the commission on any subject whatsoever, you are now free to do so. Please come to the podium. We may not address what you are speaking to, but we will hear you. Anybody wish to speak? Hearing none, I'll close that. Future meetings, Mr. Schmaling.
Yes, your next meeting is scheduled for April 17th, and you do have at least one item for that meeting.
Okay. Thank you, commissioners. We are adjourned.